the Mecca. What are the comparisons?
Yeah, I would say first of all, the thing that shocked me the most was the change in weather. Lima, Peru is very similar weather to LA. So winter is 60 degrees and cloudy, summer is 80 degrees and sunny, and it rains maybe a couple of times a year. So going from that to moving to New York, seeing my first thunderstorm in my life was like life changing. And then, things that have happened after, like the hurricanes, tornadoes, all of these things were so foreign to me that I remember growing up here, just sitting by the window and just staring at the thunderstorms and just being so obsessed with this new thing that I was experiencing. And the rain, I had never seen rain like in a shower. It looked like the whole city was just inside the shower.
Is there anything better than a trip getting ready?
Nope.
For a long journey where our podcast released a new epi, searching for a fade fiend, new fixation. Giving this a subscribe is the same sensation. Started with the day ones, they gave us fuel to support the season. Could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here for a reason. Notification bells, text some friends, all to let you know. Check your Bluetooth, connect, talk your wisdom out.
Welcome in, everyone. Episode 182, Meet and Greet, with our guest, JD Valladares Williams. JD. I gotta know here, JD, before we get started, I love names, I love those type of things, so maybe you're gonna be used to this. Okay, Valladares is awesome. And then you follow it up with Williams, which is boring. Come on, JD. What? You had me with the JD because I'm wondering what's that stand for? Valladares. I've never met anyone. JD, do you know how many Williamses I know? What's going on here? Explain the name to us.
Sure. So first I'll start with my first name. So JD starts, it means Juan Diego.
Oh.
And it's actually related to religion, which I'm not religious, but my mother was. And it goes back to the indigenous boy in Mexico that saw the Virgin Mary.
Oh, okay. We're all going to be Googling that after this. That's cool. I'm glad I asked. I'm glad I get distracted by that stuff. Now, Valladares, I can't say I've met. Is that a common name?
I'm not sure how common it is in Latin America. I wouldn't say it's one of the more common names, but its origin is from the northern region between Spain and Portugal, so in Galicia. And, honestly, I don't really have much of a connection to that last name. I thought it was a lot more important when I was younger, but the more I discovered my roots and the origins of my family, I realized that there's a high likelihood that this name was just given to my family by the people who at the time owned some of my father's side of the family.
Wait, where was that at? What region are we referring to? That?
So I was originally born in Lima, Peru, and my dad's side of the family is from a region south of that, Ica. And they have a really big Afro-Peruvian population. In, I would say, the early 1900s, about 30% of the population in Lima was Black. And so, not a lot of people know it unless, you Google it and research a bit, but there's actually a really big Afro-Latino population in general, but as is with social norms and whatnot, everybody was kind of told to hide that part of their identity. Yes. And so it took us actually researching and looking for that to really find more of what our real story is. And then the Williams side is my mom's side of the family, who also resided in Peru, but they are of British origin. And so there's a lot of mix of cultures there, and that's why the two names don't really go together, but here they are.
You gotta be, wait a minute. So you you grew up in Peru. Actually, how long were you in Peru? I'm gonna say you got out of Peru somewhere around 13 years old.
That's a pretty good guess. I left Peru when I was 11 years old.
See, I have this rule, JD, that man, I hate JD. Juan Diego is just like amazing. They flow together, and then with the backstory. But I'm gonna try to stay JD. I have this rule about accents. I've lived all over the world, a few different countries, but I always say when people come to America, the United States of America, if they get here before 12, you don't get an accent. And then anything after that, you start to get an accent. So I went 13. I can't say I think, and trust me, by no means am I some kind of a pro on this. But I was like, I'm gonna give 13 because he said he was there. So let's give him an accent. But man, I'm not really getting that. So you threw me out there. You were tough. You're tough. I normally do pretty well with that.
Yeah, and the reason, just to go back to JD for a second, the reason why I go by JD is I do love my name, Juan Diego, but it's very difficult for people in the US to pronounce it. And I know that some people kind of have this mentality of, well, it's my name, so I'm going to be proud of it, and people just have to get used to it. For me, it comes back to I love my name so much that I don't want people to butcher my name.
Yes.
And so to me, it's when I'm in the presence of other Latinos or people who speak Spanish, I will introduce myself as Juan Diego. But when I'm in English-speaking settings, I just don't want somebody to say Juan Diego because it really bothers my ears. And so I'd rather just protect my name. It's really about protecting what's important to me.
Where are all the places that you've lived in the United States of America? I'm just curious.
Well, only New York. I moved to Queens, New York when I was 11, and I've been here since, except for 2 years in my mid-20s when I moved to Spain to teach English. Otherwise, I've been in Queens, New York. Yeah.
You know, you don't meet a lot of people named JD from New York. JD stereotypically is, and hopefully you can agree with me on this. We're getting some Southern vibes here, Southern United States of America. You know, it's just like you got to be a good old boy. Oh, I'm JD. Does that happen? Do you come across that?
I think I come across more of people always being curious about what it stands for. But I do see those connections to the South, and that people from the South tend to have two names more than in the North. So I definitely do. If I do connect with people that go by initials, they're usually from the South, which is very interesting.
Yes. There's a John David that goes by JD. There's a Joseph DeLawrence that goes by JD, and they don't even know what the JD stands for because their whole lives down in the South, it's been JD. I went to college down in Florida. I lived in Georgia for a little while as a kid. Okay, so let's start there. You were in, did you say Lima, Peru?
Correct.
And that's the capital, right?
Yes.
All right. Big city. I've never been there. I have a buddy. She's there. I got to get her on the pod. Matter of fact, thank you. I'm going to send her this link because I believe she's big timing. You know how Peruvians are. But no, I can't ever get her on. She was supposed to be the first, and now I told her that. So hopefully now she's very embarrassed by this. But what's Lima like in comparison to New York City? I mean, the Mecca. What are the comparisons?
Yeah, I would say, first of all, the thing that shocked me the most was the change in weather. Lima, Peru is very similar weather to LA. So winter is 60 degrees and cloudy. Summer is 80 degrees and sunny, and it rains maybe a couple of times a year. So going from that to moving to New York, seeing my first thunderstorm in my life was like life changing. And then, things that have happened after, like the hurricanes, tornadoes, all of these things were so foreign to me that I remember growing up here, just sitting by the window and just staring at the thunderstorms and just being so obsessed with this new thing that I was experiencing. And the rain, I had never seen rain like in a shower. It looked like the whole city was just inside the shower.
JD, for our listeners, I've heard this, and I looked it up once or twice. You guys get more rain in New York than most people realize. You're ahead of Seattle, which most of us think is a very rainy city. What would you say when you realize just how much rain you guys get up there? I don't think a lot of people know that.
I'm one of the people that didn't know it rains here more than Seattle. That's news to me.
Oh, okay.
Well, what I would say is that no matter how much it rains in New York, or no matter the weather in New York, it is one of those cities where there could be a blizzard outside and people are still going about their day like nothing's wrong. Like, wow. The city truly doesn't stop for anything. If somebody's having a party and there's a blizzard, they're still having a party. They still expect you to come. Yeah. I don't think it's like that in everywhere else.
Before we leave Lima, Peru, and I may just have to come back to it again, could you put on your travel agent hat? Why would we want to go to Lima, Peru?
Sure. Well, usually when I speak to people that are interested in Peru, everybody says Machu Picchu and Cusco, right? And that's what they want to see. And rightly so, because it is a pretty incredible place. But so is Lima. Lima, is the capital, and so there's a lot of mixture of different cultures, and you could see that in our food too. Like, we have Italian influences, Chinese, Japanese, and so it's really a mix of a lot of cultures. So I would say the number one thing to do when you come to Lima is to eat, because we have just such a diverse array of foods and fusions of foods that you just have to come to Lima to eat. And also, if anybody is into surfing, we're a big surfing capital.
Wow. Wait a minute. What? For those who may not know, what's your daytime job? Because you just killed travel agent. What do you normally do? Because we're gonna do a little comparison here. What do you normally do? And you don't have to say exactly who, but what do you do?
Yeah, so I have my own consulting business, and I focus on emotional intelligence training. So really, the skills that everybody expects from us in the workplace, but it wasn't part of our curriculum in school, or most workplaces don't do professional development for you to up your social skills. So it's I wouldn't say uncharted territory, but definitely one that doesn't get enough funding. And I think that's changing because of what we expect from our leaders and managers post-pandemic. The pandemic was a time where everybody was feeling a lot of uncertainty, and all of a sudden, you couldn't just have this confidence that you have it all figured out. You had to actually get real and say, I don't know the outcome of this, and we're just going to figure it out on the way. And people had to really change the way that they were speaking to people and really have a more human-centered mindset to communication. And while that's still in demand, I think there's a lot of people who haven't really honed in and sharpened those skills.
We're definitely going to come back to that. I've got a few items there I'd like to go to. All right, so you had me at the food. Everything else you said about Lima, Peru, it was wonk, 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 wonk to me. Because the way you said all the fusion, we get some Japanese influence and some Chinese influence, and oh my gosh, that's great. So hopefully I was able to help some of our listeners, watchers. All right, let's come back to the surfing part, because you're living in New York City. When's the last time you've been on a surfboard?
Well, last time I've been on a surfboard was probably more than 15, 20 years ago. I would say I'm not the surfer of the family. My cousins are. They all grew up surfing. I was more of the one who held a lot of respect for the ocean. And that comes from spending a lot of time with my grandma, who also had like this fear/respect of the water. And so I stuck more to the land and would just let them go off and surf. I stay back and, eat.
All right. Could you help us with the neighbors of Peru? What countries are your border neighbors?
Oof, okay, geography lesson. So we have borders with Ecuador, with Chile, Brazil. I wouldn't say Bolivia. Yes, we do have borders with Bolivia. I'm unsure about Colombia, so I want to let people figure out. But
this puts them not only in the region, but it's making them say to themselves, "Oh, I knew that," or "No, I didn't know that." So thank you, Donato. But hey, JD helped us out. Okay, so in that, who do you see that you have the most in common with? Do you see other Ecuadorians and you're like, hey, one of us? Or Chileans? Where do you see that vibe, the kinship?
I'll tell you, growing up in Peru and being in school, we had a lot of, I wouldn't say kinship with those countries. There was always fights over territories. With Ecuador and with Chile. And with Chile, we have this battle about pisco, which is our national liquor, but it's also Chile's national liquor. And so there's this whole fight about where is its true origin and who owns it. And so even though we should be more united, there's a lot of separation that happens in Latin America where one country thinks it's better than the other. And it's definitely been a different experience in the US, in that while a lot of people still hold some of those stereotypes about these people or these people, having stepped outside of that, we're all like, well, we're all immigrants now here, so we might as well stick together.
Yeah. Okay. Here's where I judge you. Listeners, watchers, I told them this was just going to be a friendly conversation, but now I gotta get the hard stuff going. Come on, JD. Chile, all they have is that little sliver of land. Surely Big Bad Peru can offer up just a little bit. I mean, these guys are falling off into the ocean. And then secondly, isn't Peru and Chile separated by like a mountain range? What else is there to fight for? I thought, I could be wrong, but I thought there was like a mountain range natural border, and shouldn't that be good enough? I almost, are you able to help us a little bit with that?
Yeah, so the big fight between Chile and Peru was the Battle of Arica. And it's actually not a mountain range, it's like a desert land. So I really don't honestly know the origins of why there was this fight over territory. I just know that it did create this tension between Chileans and Peruvians, and that, we were taught in school that, they kind of took our land. And
oh, man.
I don't really know what that means, because if I look back at history, well, before that, Peru, Chile, Brazil, Colombia, they were all part of Peru because Peru was this huge colony
No.
that was, colonized by the Europeans, but
Yeah.
it was like this larger territory that was all together. So I don't know why that changed, but I'm also not a big fan of borders in general because they are imaginary lines that people fight over, and I don't understand it.
Okay, so I got two things that I'm hoping here, and JD, I'm all about the drama. Here's the first thing, and then hey, now you're realizing my emotional intelligence. So the first thing is, if you get a geography lesson from a Peruvian, they'll tell you that they owned everything. Everything was a part of them, and then we offered Chile that, and we gave Colombia that, and we gave Brazil that. So I'm gonna do that to you. And then the second thing is, I am hoping, I am praying, I'm going to go outside and do a rain dance to make sure that this episode flies off the shelves over in Chile, because I want them to rail against the Peruvian school system of what they're teaching, because you said that's what you learned. So I'm hoping we blow up in Chile.
I mean, I think it's always interesting what you are taught in school, because it's always a version of history that benefits the people in that region, right? And so who actually knows the true story? I sure don't. I wasn't there. And so I take all of that with a grain of salt now as an adult. But as a kid, of course, you were like, oh, no, this is our land. And you grow up and you realize, actually, I don't know, because the victors write the stories, right? And they always make themselves look better. So
yes, that's you're so correct there. All right, so then you get to America. You get to America at 11. Were we welcoming? Like, what, fitting into New York of all the places? My gosh, I used to be the country cousin from down south who visited New York. My parents are from New York, and man, what a culture shock. What about you? How was that?
it was culture shock is like a small word for it, really, or term. Apart from the shock of the different types of weather that there are here, it was also I came here during sixth grade, and so I went right into the school system, and even how we do division in Peru is different than here. So when I was taking the test to see where they would place me at what grade level, I was like, oh, we do the divisions like the opposite way. It's like one does it like going up and the other one does it going down. So that was something interesting. But then the other thing was the food. I remember going to the cafeteria the first day of school and just smelling this mix of bleach. That was how they clean all of the cafeteria tables, and the smell of just fried food.
Oh my gosh.
That just that also tasted kind of funny.
Oh man.
And it's in Latin America, in Peru, I was spoiled in that we would get all of our produce and meats from the market, and it was a small market, and it was the time when you ask for chicken and they go and grab the chicken and kill it, and then so it's super fresh.
Yes.
So then to go from that to here where most of our food is frozen, and then we thought it was just a big change in like everything tastes so different here.
Yes. Okay. What did you adopt early? Like what American food was something that you were like, okay, fine. I guess if I gotta eat something, I'll eat this for the rest of my life. Was there anything that you remember grabbing your attention? And we eat a lot of cereal and probably a lot of sugar. Like what were those things that grabbed you?
Oh yeah, because I remember growing up in Peru, my breakfast was oatmeal with some sort of fruit. And then when we moved here, it was you can eat any cereal that's full of sugar for your breakfast. And so I would go back between the Cookie Crisp and the Oreo O's.
Uh-huh.
And yeah, it was like having dessert for breakfast. It was such a strange thing, but as a kid, I'm not gonna complain.
Yeah. I, I, I'm so curious now. What group of kids did you end up aligning with as soon as you got here? I don't know if it was other kids that, because it's a melting pot, and so there's probably someone that just came to America like you, or maybe you saw we played a lot of baseball and or stickball as you guys do in New York. I'm curious, what groups did you go to?
Yeah, so that was also that. I think that was the biggest part of the culture shock, because while New York is very diverse, particularly Queens. Queens is the most diverse neighborhood in the world, has the most, nationalities. Um, Something that was important for my father was to relocate us to a white neighborhood,
Mhm.
because at the time that was his idea of a safe place. But
Right.
also, he didn't want me to mix with other Latinos because he thought that I would get too comfortable to speaking Spanish and I wouldn't really develop my English skills. And so he said, if I really immerse you in this language and in this culture, then you're going to have no choice but to speak English. And so while I understand his point that he was trying to get at the same time, it was an incredibly lonely experience because I didn't have any people in my classrooms that spoke Spanish, and so it was a time where not only do I have no one to speak Spanish with, but I also don't know the English language yet, and so I wasn't able to communicate with people. So it was a very, very isolating time.
Yeah. No, I can understand that. Wow. I didn't think about that. I can't say I knew where you were going to go when he wanted to take you to the white neighborhood. And I can understand where he's coming from, but I would have never thought of how lonely that would be for you. And that makes me a little unhappy there that you don't seem too broken up about it, but now I'm kind of hurt. I'm kind of kind of lonely
I
myself.
sure was. I sure was growing up, like, coming home every day from school, like crying, saying I want to go back home, because
Yeah.
to me, back home was really Peru, and this just felt all foreign. But living in a neighborhood where I really had to immerse myself in the culture and the language did force me to learn English rather quickly. And so within a year, I was pretty fluent, which
Okay.
I'm not sure would have happened had I had more access to people speaking Spanish. So
Yes.
it has the good and the bad, because in one way it did help me develop those skills much faster, but on the other side it was a very lonely time not seeing anyone who looked like me around me.
So, were you still carrying on the Spanish language in the house? Which parent or both parents were still allowing, or were they trying to focus on English in the house too?
I moved to the US with my father,
Okay.
and when he started working here, it was really any sort of job he could get, and
Uh-huh.
working long hours to try to get us to a stable place. So
Yeah.
I was spending a lot of time just alone at home,
Oh,
and just seeing my dad for dinner and
yep.
speaking Spanish for a little bit, and then the next day just going to school and coming home and just watching MTV. And that was
Okay.
my babysitter.
That's exactly where I was going next. What do we call which is this is this is different. I don't know your age, but I don't think, because the age I'm giving you, I don't think you're what we call a door latch kid or key lock kid, but you were because your dad was out working. Because I think you're a millennial. I don't know if you're Gen Z, but so as a millennial, you're not in that age group. There's the door latch kids where they come home from school and there's no parents there because the parents are still at work until 5 or 5:30. But now I got to know, because that's where I was going next. I know they didn't look at TV the way we look at TV in America back in Peru. It sounds like, in my mind, stereotype. Here comes the stereotype. Here it comes. This will probably offend you. In my mind, back in Peru, they're surfing. They're playing soccer. They're playing outside, doing stuff in the, as you said, the Los Angeles, California weather. But here in America, especially New Yorkers, we're looking at a lot of TV. So then what was the TV show that grabbed you, that you started saying, okay, this is America? What were some of your favorites?
Funny enough, that started happening while I was in Peru, because I am a millennial. I am, I guess, more of an elder millennial because I'm in my late 30s. Okay. And so in the early 90s, when I was growing up, a lot of television, like cable became a thing in Peru. And so we were getting access to a lot of TV shows for kids, like in Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network. And so I was growing up with Rugrats, Clarissa Explains It All, Are You Afraid of the Dark? All in Spanish, but it was so interesting. My favorite was Gullah Gullah Island, because that Viña Viña. I remember. So I remember just being obsessed with that culture because it was so different than ours.
Yeah.
But I would say it was definitely a mix of, okay, you get a few hours of television and now you have to go outside and play soccer. So it was kind of, my family was conscious of, like, yes, you can submerge yourself into this American culture and TV for a bit, but you also got to be outside and be a kid.
Okay. I was going to get there later. I kind of offered a little bit of it in my stereotype of Peruvians. You didn't look like you got too mad when I got there. Stereotypes are cool. I'm talking to a guy who talks emotional intelligence. He's a consultant. But stereotypes are cool when they're true and it's funny, but then, they could be divisive or hurtful. But JD, when you came to America, you had superpowers in soccer, didn't you? The first time a ball got thrown down, you were just like the LeBron James of your neighborhood, weren't you?
I was not.
What?
No. So I definitely played soccer as a kid, but I'll tell you, I wasn't very coordinated, nor am I very coordinated now. And so I was usually just playing defense or warming the bench. So
I got to be on the bench.
I would say, a lot more interested in basketball. And I would play a lot of basketball by myself or with my dad on the weekends, which I thought would be a great connection point when I moved here, when I went to school, and most of the kids in school were either playing handball or basketball.
Yeah.
But it went back to that language barrier, that because I didn't speak the language, they didn't want to play with me. So I wasn't playing basketball with those kids and kind of lost those skills.
Yeah. All right. High school. You get to high school. That means you got here in 6th grade. So we'll give you 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. By high school, how comfortable were you at that point? As fitting in as a New Yorker, did you call yourself an American then, or were you still like, well, I'm in America, but how comfortable were you then?
Yeah, I think still to this day, it's difficult to imagine myself as an American, even though I am a naturalized citizen and I have spent the majority of my life here.
Yeah.
There's still this very, very real awareness of that I am seen as foreign in this country, no matter how much time I spend here. And rather than be saddened by that, I'm proud of it because I do want to acknowledge my roots, and that while I contribute, to this country and pay my taxes and all of that, there's still all of this rich history that comes before I moved here, that I consider my identity. So when people, ask me where I'm from, the first thing I say, I'm Peruvian. The second thing is a New Yorker, but the first thing is definitely a Peruvian, because that's also how people perceive me.
We're gonna get to a couple other things, but now let's see. I'm trying to get the whole country of Chile against you. How about this? Let me get the other boroughs against you. What's your favorite borough in New York? I know you said you live in Queens, but what's your favorite?
Queens.
Ah,
Absolutely Queens. I'll tell you, I spend a lot of time in Brooklyn, but
yes,
I think Queens is just something special.
Yeah.
And it's really that every neighborhood you go to, you really get a very different experience, because it's interesting that Queens is one of the most diverse places in the world, yet at the same time, it's segregated. And so, for Greek food, you go to Astoria. For Latin food or Indian food, you go to Jackson Heights. And so it's like all of these different neighborhoods have their own little niche and cultures. And so to me, that's interesting because I can go into a different neighborhood and step into a different culture. So that's really cool to me. Some parts of Brooklyn are like that too, but it's definitely more, I guess, in your face in Queens.
Okay. How do you? Let me back up. I got to get this one first because this is the more exciting one. For those, I meet people all the time that have never been to New York. So I want to lead with this, JD. Again, feel free to judge me. I won't throw attitude at you for judging me. Do you own a car?
I do not even have a driver's license.
Exactly.
So that is definitely New York.
Yeah. Oh, heck yeah, it is. All right. So how are you getting to Brooklyn? What do you do to get to Brooklyn when you go?
Usually take an Uber or the bus sometimes if the bus is working. There's not actually, outside of the G train, there's not really a connection between Queens and Brooklyn. And this is because earlier on, when the public transport system was being developed, there were trams between Queens and Brooklyn. And so that subterranean part of it wasn't developed like it has to the other boroughs. But then the trams went away, and then all of a sudden we're all connected to Manhattan, but we're not really connected to each other. And they're starting some projects for starting to make those connections between the two boroughs, but most of the time you have to go through Manhattan to get to places in Brooklyn.
Wow. Man, I didn't know that. Well, thanks a lot. That's that's so cool to know. Hard for you, but it'll get better. It's getting better. It sounds like they're aware of it. I'll just say it that way. They're aware. All right. So for people that have never been to New York, tell me your two favorite destinations that you would recommend. So Donato's coming to town. JD, you just met me I'll fly into JFK. So I'm at JFK. I say, hey, JD, what's up? Boom. We have our own special handshake, JD. Just trust me. It's awesome. And then you say, all right, Donato, I got to take you these two places in any order, but we'll go here first. Where are the two places in all of New York that you got to take me? And you only get two. I might give you an honorable mention at the end, but what are the two?
Okay. Well, the first one, and let me tell you, as a New Yorker, you never want to go to Times Square. But as a tourist, you have to experience Times Square at night. It is just, it is a sensory experience that is a bit overwhelming because you are just seeing lights everywhere and just people and just all this hustle and bustle. So everything that you see in the movies growing up, all of a sudden you're in the middle of it and you're like, I'm actually here. What I see in the movies all the time.
Okay, yeah, that's a good one. I like that. Thank you. And where you take, wow, if you start off with that, anything else sounds like it'd be a bore. But I got to know, where's the second place you're going to take me?
The second place would be to go downtown to where the Brooklyn Bridge starts and just walk the Brooklyn Bridge over to Brooklyn.
Yeah.
And you're going to get some of the best pizza at the other end of that bridge.
That's it. That's it. Yeah. In my mind, when I asked you, I was like, please include food. Please include food. Please include food. And you did. JD, I'm actually coming to New York later on this summer. But I'm glad. I'm so glad that you did that. All right. I like that. The Brooklyn Bridge is so beautiful. Okay, we'll let them take the rest of that. If I did give you the honorable mention because you did such a great job there, you're a very decisive person. You're like, oh, I know where I'm taking you. Do you have an honorable mention, or in this case, it'd be your number 3? Because I just want to see what missed the top 2.
So the other place I would recommend is in Queens. It's Chinatown. Our Chinatown in Queens is just, it's really stepping into something else with great food. Great food. It's really just, you can go and just eat all sorts of delicious Asian foods, and it's also not as expensive because it's not in Manhattan.
Yeah.
You're getting really a feel of what local people really live like, because not everybody can live in Manhattan, and I would say most of our service workers live out in the other boroughs and further inland, and so it's really, you're getting to meet the people that truly are from here or have made their lives here. Wherein the people that live in Manhattan now, it's a very different perspective, and they're usually from resources.
Yes.
So going to a place like Chinatown in Flushing, Queens, is you're getting the real deal of what New York really looks like.
Man, what a great! This already is an awesome episode. I already know this. People are gonna love this. Okay, we know our Chilean watchers are not, but everyone else is gonna love this. You're doing great. Okay, let's talk about a little bit what you do, because I have some questions. Man, I don't want this to. Please don't think this is free consulting. These are just questions that I have. Diversity. You were talking about emotional IQ, or I gather that. Why is it that in the cafeteria, all of the kids who look a certain way sit together, and these kids look a certain way and they sit together, and then when they grow up, you will rarely see that in a work site. It just we kind of segregate. Can you, in your dealings as a consultant, as a person that's lived on this earth and one of the most diverse cities in all of the world, why is that? Why are we so? Is that emotional intelligence where, oh, I want to go what's comfortable or what's easy versus I'm gonna go meet someone different? Or why is that?
Yeah, so I do have a degree in psychology, so I did study a bit of this, and it goes back to the biases and the mindsets that we have kind of growing up, that we have this affinity, and it's actually called affinity bias, to people who look like us, who reminds us of ourselves, because we feel seen and represented in that, and so we find comfort in that because it doesn't feel foreign. It feels like this is my tribe. And as you step out of that, if you do, some people don't, if you do and get to explore the world, you open your mind to people who live very different experiences than yours, and you either open up to it and embrace the discomfort that might come along with it, or you go back to your bubble and stay comfortably in it. I am one of those people that definitely left that bubble. I moved to another country in my mid-20s to really escape that and see what the rest of the world lives like. But, I would say it's definitely rooted in how comfortable you want to feel. And so some people really don't want to embrace discomfort, even though that's the place of growth. We don't grow when we're feeling comfortable. We just stay the same.
So as an organization, how do you help that? Like, how can you, what can you do to try to make sure that it doesn't become, I don't want to say cliquish, but let's just say I don't see the intermingling that I would expect, that I hope for, that our code of cultures says that we have, that we work together. Like, you're forced to work together, but in the cafeteria, I just don't see the blending like we want. Could you explain that? As adults,
I think even as adults, we have to be really intentional about reaching out to others who are unlike us, because even as adults, people still want to be comfortable, right? And I think the best way to bridge that gap is to just discuss our experiences, and then through those conversations, find the threads that link us. So, maybe I had a very different experience growing up than some of my Italian friends, for example, because where I grew up was a very Greek and Italian neighborhood. But there were some things that were similar to our cultures, of like, if you go to someone's house and grandma's cooking, if you don't ask for seconds, that's an insult. And that's in Latin America and Italy. And so it's really finding those commonalities, that even though our cultures can be very different in our identities, there's also this, I had a very similar experience growing up where, I had to ask for that second plate, or otherwise I was going to get in trouble.
Yes. Okay. You're saying emotional intelligence. We're not all there. As adults, we're not as high as we want to be. Here's what I say. I always say, take the high road. Now, it's so easy to say, take the high road, but then you don't take the high road. You want everybody else to take the high road, and you don't take it. Why do we have to do that? If in our common lunchroom, JD, I eat your yogurt, and you find out it was me, maybe you're not taking the high road there. And now you're either definitely going to take something of mine that has Donato written on it, or we're going to have a problem. Like we're talking about and you live in New York, so I'll say a $2 yogurt. Here in Austin, Texas, I'm paying about $1 for my yogurt. But what would you say to something like that? The high road when it comes to emotional intelligence?
Yeah. I wouldn't describe it as the high road, at least for myself, right? I would say part of emotional intelligence is self-regulation. And so it's really, how do you manage your emotions, and how do you question what's true versus what you're feeling? Because a feeling is not a fact, right? Yeah. It's a feeling. A thought is not a fact. It's a thought. And so say if we were in the same office and you took my yogurt, sure, my first instinct would be to react. And so in that reaction, I would be perhaps aggressive in my delivery of, why'd you eat my yogurt, and scream.
Hey, calm down,
When-
JD. Calm down. This was just a random scenario. Why are you raising your voice?
But if I were to really be able to regulate those emotions, then I can step back for a moment and think, this is how I'm feeling, but I don't know the whole story. This is the story that I'm making up in my head of what's happening. I don't know if, for whatever reason, perhaps the way somebody else grew up, it was kind of, we share everything. And so it's,
Yes.
but that's how somebody grew up. Or it's maybe somebody doesn't have access to food and they were just hungry. And I can't really blame somebody for that. And so emotional intelligence is about taking a step back and really looking at the whole picture and saying, I may not have all of the facts or all of the story of what's happening here. So I'm going to dive deeper and find out what's really happening here. Or am I going to just react and go with what I'm just assuming?
JD, I don't envy you in your consultations because I've lived around the world. I've worked in a lot of different places. I've worked for some Fortune 500 companies. I'm a veteran, and people ain't ready. They're not taking the time to do all of that. How are you making way? I mean, we are getting all of the ology out of that psychology degree because they're not. How do you get people? Okay, how do you get people's attention to the facts that I have to be intentional in my understanding? I might not have explained that well. Do you understand what I'm saying? To be able to receive what you're saying, because it's always like the world according to me, isn't it?
I would say that's definitely the idea in America, in the US, right? It's a very individualistic kind of mindset. And so we are thinking from the point of us. So it's kind of, what is the point of that then for our own self-development? What is my benefit if I decide to upskill in my emotional intelligence? And so it's about showing the numbers, the data behind of it, showing the return on investment for a company, for its leaders, showing the ways in which somebody who builds their emotional intelligence is able to move up in their corporate world versus someone who doesn't. Because part of the reason why people are now taking an interest in emotional intelligence is because there are numbers behind it that show that employee engagement goes up, absenteeism goes down, retention goes up, attrition goes down. And so it's the reason why most people leave their jobs is because of their managers.
Yes.
And so if as a manager, you have the emotional intelligence to really be able to lead your team, you're going to go much further than other people. And so at the end of the day, it's, if you want to really be a great leader, you want people to kind of follow what you're saying and really be someone that people look up to as, this person is going to support me, this person is going to motivate me, this person listens to me, then you have to develop those skills. You can still move up in the world without doing any of that, but the perception, the day-to-day, those relationships that you're building are going to look very different if you haven't taken the time to, build up those skills.
I'll make this the last question about this. Sorry, because you're like, man, I talk work all the time. I thought we were going to have some other conversations, but well, that's how I found you. I found you in a mutual group that we're in on LinkedIn, and I was like, what? Oh, I've got to talk. So thanks for. I was going to say this on the way out, but again, I'll probably say it again. But thanks for coming on, because this was all this other stuff I got prior to this point. Amazing. But this is the last one then. We all got that coworker that throws everybody under the bus, intentionally or unintentionally. So here's the scenario, JD. You and I work together. At this time, I am not a yogurt stealer, so I think you like me. But you are in the group chat right now, and then you say to the group chat, "Hey, Donato, Robert from Aluminum Foil Company is calling because he needs help, and he says you haven't been answering any of his emails." JD, I know you did not just do that in this group chat and throw me under the bus like that. You see that, JD? You see how now I'm raising my voice. JD, I know you didn't just do so. How are we gonna handle this, JD? How would you talk about emotional intelligence? Because the first thing is, I think you should have read the room and realized that wasn't the best way for you to phrase it, handle it, deal with it. And now you put me on blast. And then the second part is, you don't know me like that, JD, and I'm embarrassed. And my reaction is, now I'm mad at you. And then here's I think this will be the last stereotype. Now I got to meet you outside, and we have to have a queen's knife fight after we tie our hands together. Okay, hopefully that's the last New York stereotype. But how do we fix this, JD?
So first, if I took that approach, I would have definitely been wrong, because what I'm doing is calling you out in front of other people rather than calling you in on a one-on-one conversation. And so, of course, your reaction is going to be a defensive one, a perhaps aggressive one, because I just embarrassed you or shamed you in front of other people. And so it is a reasonable response, because we are emotional beings at the end of the day. So really, if you want to prevent that problem, you have that conversation one-on-one with that person. But if you already did this, if you already did that damage, then you have to approach the problem from, I'm not going to focus on my intention. I'm going to focus on my impact. And so my intention was letting you know about this aluminum foil person that can't get in touch with you. Right. And I didn't mean to shame you or blah, blah, blah. But that doesn't matter at this point. The intention takes a back seat to the actual impact that my actions had on you. And yes. So if I want to resolve that conflict, then I have to first apologize. Second, be specific about what I'm apologizing for. And third, let you know how I'm going to approach this in a different way in the future. And so what I'm doing is I'm acknowledging that I did something wrong and saying sorry. I'm being specific about what I did wrong instead of just saying, well, I'm sorry. I'm actually listening to you by repeating back what harmed you. And the third is that I'm letting you know that I'm committing to behaving differently in the future. So now the ball is kind of, somewhere in the middle of, well, the next time we interact with each other, am I going to follow up with that commitment and actually change my behavior? Or am I going to repeat the same behavior as before? So there lies whether I am actually sorry about something or I really wasn't and I'm not changing my pattern.
Wow. JD, you talked me off the ledge. I'm getting worked up. JD. I was going to chase you all the way back to Peru because I don't want you anywhere around me. Oh my gosh, wow! I like what you said there. I like that, and I hope our listeners can see that. That was very clear to me. I don't like that scenario because it had me a little worked up. I got into it. I got into character.
Because when we feel like under attack, we go to our fight or flight response, right? And so we are no longer thinking clearly. Our physiology is just changing. Our heartbeat increases. We tense up, and so there is all of this that's actually going on in our body, not just our minds. That's happening. That's pushing us towards reaction. And so we really have to be conscious about taking a step back, taking that extra breath, asking ourselves, do we know the whole story? But that takes practice. It's not, I go in and teach you how to be emotionally intelligent, all of a sudden it's a done deal.
Right.
It's an everyday practice.
Yeah.
You have to continue doing it in order to really remain at that place.
We are at the end. There's so much more. I mean, there's day to day. But that's, I know I say this, but I like to leave a little meat on the bone because hopefully you could come back, JD. I am always interested. I think I have a diverse listening audience and a wide range of topics, interests. So I would love to have you back on any other project because this was awesome. Before we go, is there anything that you'd maybe want to offer to our listeners, those watching, about you, about your consultation, that they could even pass along? Sure.
So as I said, I train people in emotional intelligence. So really the kind of topics that I talk about are how to give and receive feedback, how to manage conflict, how to pick up on nonverbal cues when you're talking to somebody. And my approach is really inspired by the time that I spent teaching high schoolers. So I think that storytelling is really important. Gamification is really important to keep people engaged. And I use a lot of pop culture references to get people to actually pay attention because everybody loves pop culture.
Yes,
and
so
I couldn't really find the space in other firms that I've worked for to really be able to make that vision a reality. And so I had to create my own space. And along with that, since, my thing is about being an open book, about being vulnerable, I also do speaking engagements on my LGBTQ identity and also as a neurodiverse person, because those are two lived experiences that I can actually speak to. So they have an actual person who's telling them their story. But then I'm also letting you know, what are those tangible things that you could do as an ally to somebody? And so that's my way of trying to improve this world, because it's a pretty tough place for everybody.
It certainly is. You may have found some, except for the Chilean listeners. Please give me some Chilean listeners. How would you may have some new fans, followers, any social media you'd like to offer for them to be able to maybe stay in contact and learn more, just be entertained with where you end up next on on your hunt throughout New York?
Yes. So my consulting business is Vawi Consulting, and it's the merging of my two last names, so Valladares and Williams. So it's VAWI. So the Instagram and my website are both Vawi Consulting. So vawiconsulting.com or at Vawi Consulting. But it was really based in that I have these two very different identities that for whatever reason were brought together before I was born. And now I'm having to deal with these two very different worlds that have really pushed me to figure out how our minds work, how people interact with each other, and made me want to follow this type of work.
This was awesome, JD. Thank you very much. You did not disappoint, and you left us wanting more. Thanks again for coming on, and have a great rest of the day.
Thank you. You as well. It was lovely to talk with you.
Oh, I enjoyed it. We'll see you.
Okay. Yeah.